In this video, I demonstrate the use of the web browser control, which supplies the full functionality of Internet Explorer within your application. So I've created a little sample web browser. Let's go ahead and just run it through its paces here. Watch the little progress bar as the page loads. We can refresh, we can stop a page from loading. Let's go to msn.com and go, and we'll stop it kind of halfway through and then hit refresh to continue on. And there's some other functionality that we'll take a look at just a minute. But the question is, what can you do with this? Well, you can go ahead and create your own version of Internet Explorer. Your version may only browse to certain websites, or perhaps it provides multiple tabs for viewing, or maybe better bookmark management than Internet Explorer, or possibly responds to certain elements, DHTML elements, differently than Internet Explorer does. This is a control that you can have a lot of fun with. Now, beyond some of the obvious functionality that we just took a look at, we're going to look at two methods of how to interface your application code with your DHTML code. So we'll start to wander into some more advanced level concepts near the end of the video. If nothing else, you'll see what's possible, and you'll keep it in your back pocket for a time when you might need it in the future. Let's start with some of the basics. To set up this example, you'll notice that, first of all, we have a status strip that supports a progress bar. We have a tool strip that contains the bulk of our initial functionality with a go button, a stop button, and a refresh button, as well as a text box for an address bar. And then a menu strip that we really didn't take a look at, but gives us the ability to view source and, as we'll look at in a few moments, inject some custom content into the web browser control so that we can kind of inject our own web pages into the control programmatically. So you'll be amazed at how few lines of code it really takes to copy some of the Internet Explorer functionality. Let's take a look at the main.cs, the code for our application. We'll start by looking at the button, the Go button, that we clicked in order to navigate to our websites. Look at what we have here. We just have the navigate method of our web browser control, and we pass in an address. In this case, the address is in the text box on our tool strip. As the web page is loading, we get to handle an event called progress changed. This is sent to us from the web browser control. And here what we can do is update the progress bar in our status strip. We get a argument called web browser progress changed event args, and it's set to a variable called E, and so we're able to monitor the maximum amount. So this is the total number of items that the web browser control needs to load, and so we set that to the maximum property of our progress bar, and we'll get the current progress. So of the total number of items that it needs to load, how many has it finished? And we'll set that to the current value of the progress bar. So this will fire each time that we move towards loading more of the items that make up the entire web page. Continuing on, if we take a look at the stop buttons code, we're merely calling the stop method. Same thing for the refresh button. We have refresh. Let's take a look at another bit of functionality here. Let's go back to and take a look at the source menu option from the view menu, and we basically can see all the source code within a message box. How is that accomplished? Again, pretty simply, we're merely using a messagebox.show and retrieving the document text property of the web browser control. That's all there is to it. So as you can see, we can enable a lot of just the bare bones initial functionality with just a line of code or two. But let's start going beyond that a little bit. Let's run the application again and do a couple of things here. First of all, we're going to select this custom content menu option, and it injects in a Hello World web page. On this web page, there's a couple of buttons that would resemble JavaScript. Hello from the event handler and call a method. But let's take a look at the source for this page that we've injected in. Here we have an HTML body h1 hello world. In the body we have a button with an ID of button 1, fire an event, so that's this first button here. And then the second button is defined as button with an on-click of window.external.sayHello. Well, where is this sayHello method declared in our JavaScript? It's nowhere here in the body of our HTML document. Let's take a look at how this was accomplished. Actually, this is where we're starting to wander into some of the more advanced functionality. First of all, the way that we injected that web document into our web browser control is, again, by using the document text property of the web browser control, and we just hard code a string that happens to have some HTML in it. That's all there is to it. So that's how we displayed the page, but how do we get to some of the interactivity? Well, if you've ever used the full version of Microsoft Outlook 2003, you'll note that there's a view called Outlook Today, which allows you to see your calendar, your tasks, how many unread items are in your mailbox, and so on. It has a web feel to it. As I hover my mouse cursor over some of these items, there are links that resemble like hyperlinks, and also as I hover my mouse button over this customize, it looks like a button control is kind of coming out. So it looks very DHTML-ish. However, it still seems very much part of the entire Outlook application. So what I'm suggesting is that you can create some web pages like this that can access your application's API, such as I suspect is the case with Microsoft Outlook. This web page is accessing the Outlook API to retrieve and display these items. Or you can sort of do it the other way around, and where you can hook into a web page and handle events on the elements of the pages. And so we're going to demonstrate both of those techniques right now. Let's take a look at how to allow your web pages to access objects within your application via the web browser control. Let's start in the form load event. Notice the single line of code in the form1_load. Web browser 1 dot object for scripting equals new script methods. So by setting the object for scripting property of our web browser control, we're telling the web browser control which objects we want to expose to the DHTML code. So in this case, our application may have a component or a class that we want to allow to be called from the HTML code. So in this case, we're exposing an instance of a class called script methods. And you can see that script methods class defined above it. And as you can see, it has a single simple method called sayHello, which just is a message box.show with some little innocuous saying hello from script. So since we set the object that we'll use for scripting equal to this a reference to this class, we can now access this class and all of its methods, it happens to have only one method, from the JavaScript click event. Now the key to this example is the COM_visible attribute, and this designates our class as available to be invoked by COM from the JavaScript. In order to call your Windows Forms application via JavaScript, you need to expose an object to the JavaScript through that window.external property. So let's take a look again at our example, and we'll look at exactly what we're talking about here. First, we'll inject the custom content, and then we'll view the source. So you can see that we have our button onClick equal window.external. What does this resolve to? It resolves to that instance of the script methods class, and the way that we expose that class is by setting that object for scripting property for the web browser control and the use of that COM_visible attribute on the class itself. That's the way that we accomplish this. So now that we have a reference in window.external to the script method class, we can call any of script method classes methods, say hello in this case. It's really that easy. Imagine how cool it would be to provide a very web-like user interface, but continue to write all the application logic using your own custom classes. Similarly, we can hook into an event that is fired by our DHTML code. Now we have another button, as you can see, this button ID button 1 fire an event. What if we want to capture that event within our WinForm application? It's actually pretty easy to do. Let's go ahead and close this down. And we're going to scroll down here to the very bottom of our code example, where we see the document completed event handler. So this event will fire whenever the web page is fully loaded into our web browser control. And what we're doing in this first line of code is that we're searching for a specific HTML element called button1. Now, if we find it, which is the next line of code, then we want to associate the click event of that HTML element with a method within our code. And the way that this is accomplished in C# is different than VB. We have in C# the ability to add event handlers to an event. So this is what we're doing. We're associating a new event handler, HTML element event handler, passing in the name of the event, lm_click, which you see defined below in that void lm_click with the arguments of object sender HTML event args_e. So we create a new event handler using that HTML element event handler class, creating a new instance of that and passing it, or rather adding it to the click event of our element, the element being button1. So whenever button1 clicks, we've now associated that click event with the lm_click method that we've defined below. So this is just the C# way of dynamically hooking an event onto an object. And you can see it's fairly simple what happens after that. In the lm_click, we're merely just popping open a message box and saying hello from the event handler. It's that simple. So now, whether or not the designer of the web page intended this to happen or not, we can hook into the execution of the click event for an element called button1. As long as there's a button1 on a page, we can hook into that and run our own custom code. So that opens up a bunch of opportunities for us to develop our applications around it. So we've really shown two ways to interact with the web page. We can allow the web page to access an API within our application, or we can use our application to hook into events that are fired off by the web page. So whether you are using the simple functionality and just adding some web browsing, simple web browsing tasks to your existing application, or essentially subclassing the Internet Explorer to add your additional functionality to it, or you're going to design an entire UI around HTML and you still want that HTML to be able to call, utilize the API that you've designed, a rich object model to take care of accessing business rules or the database or so forth. You have a lot of flexibility and can have a lot of fun with this web browser control.